My childhood best friend, Marie, and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a nice campground about 2 hours from our hometown, and they would spend the entire summer out there each year staying in their camper. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still bright out but beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest with more tall, thick brush and tons of trees. So we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us. But nonetheless, out of nowhere, we heard a sudden rustling sound and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then, the sound of running footsteps followed. Marie glances back and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath to not look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look for myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her, and I just chose to listen. We both start to panic, and we were getting that feeling like when you run up the stairs after turning the basement light off in the middle of the night when you were a kid. We pick up speed as much as we could without breaking into a full sprint, knowing the ice cream shop was only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks, and we're now in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, and we were now heading towards the lake in the boat rental area instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop. I go along with it silently, understanding that ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems like whatever scared her is nowhere in sight. We then walk up to the boat rental and get us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out into the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me that there was a man behind us, and that the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, and he had a terrible smirk on his face. She swore that as he stopped running, she saw him put something shiny away in his coat. He appeared to just have emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, given the sounds we heard earlier in the trails. We reached the center of the lake and quit paddling, so I pull out my Nokia brick phone that my parents had thank God given me just in case. I handed it to Marie and I told her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale. She was lifting her hand and pointing to show me what she was seeing. I turned, and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us once, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family, and we were freaking out so bad the whole time. The sun eventually set, and it was dark out. We finally managed to get her mom on the phone to come by with the truck to come pick us up. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go up to the ice cream shop and inform an adult there and ask for her parents to come get us then. But it worked out. We got back home safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again. This happened quite a while ago when I was home alone with just my dog. So I was watching TV one night at about 11 p.m. when I hear a car pull up outside and the engine shut off. I figured it was obviously a neighbor, but my nosy dog wanted to have a look, and he went to the window. He kind of messed up the blinds when he went to look, so I had to get up to fix them. When I did, I noticed a car parked out on the street across from my house and my neighbor's house. I couldn't really make out any details, but it looked like the driver was still sitting in the car. I didn't really think anything of it. I went to my kitchen and got something to drink out of the fridge, and I went back to watching TV. Quite a while had passed since I fixed the blinds, but I'm not sure how long. I'd guess 15 or 20 minutes. Out of nowhere, I thought I heard a light tapping sound at the door. Not a knock, it was much lighter and very quiet. My dog had sat up to look at the door again, and I paused the TV when the same tapping then started on the window. I opened the blinds a little and saw a man standing there. I couldn't make out his face properly, but he immediately walked back to the door and started tapping on it again. I'm sure this doesn't sound very frightening to some of you, but I'm not sure why I suddenly had a very awful feeling. I felt absolutely terrified and I had no idea why. I live in a good neighborhood and bad things like this are not very prone to happening around here, and they just really don't in general. The tapping at the door never stopped, but something in my head was saying if I opened the door, then something really bad would happen. So I went upstairs to open a window to speak with him from up above, to ask what he wanted. It just felt safer to me doing this. He said in a really quiet voice that he was delivering pizza and told me how much it costed. I felt so stupid for being so frightened right then, and I told him I didn't order a pizza. I guessed he was speaking quietly and knocking lightly so he didn't disturb my neighbors. My dog had followed me upstairs and was letting out this odd growl and bark, which isn't really unusual for him. I was trying to shush him when the man downstairs told me he had the correct address and I better get downstairs now to open the door and to pay for what I owed and to collect my food before it gets cold. I was really confused because I most definitely didn't order any food, and I began to tell him that I didn't. But then I noticed he didn't even have a pizza in his hands. He wasn't carrying anything at all. I told him again that he had the wrong address, and he got really angry with me. He kept telling me to open the door. He was going between angry and sort of trying to persuade me to come back downstairs and to open the door. I asked him where the pizza was, and he said he had a hold of it. It was really dark, but I could definitely see that he didn't have anything in his hands. My dog was really making quite a bit of fuss at this point, and the stranger had turned into a broken record. Come downstairs, open the door. Come downstairs and open the door, just over and over again. All the noise must have alerted my neighbor, who did open his door, because my neighbor came outside and yelled at him and told him to get out of here. The man didn't say a word, but he practically sprinted across the street to his car that I had heard when he pulled up a little earlier on. He went back to the car empty-handed. I have no idea what he wanted, but he certainly wasn't a delivery driver. It really freaked me out as well because my dog is quite obviously a large breed, and the man saw him through the window, and the man wasn't deterred at all. It seems even stranger and less random that he actually drove to my house as though he planned on showing up. I don't know what he was planning to do. I had just gotten out of an 8-year abusive relationship, and I met someone on a popular online dating app. To be honest, I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to go watch a movie or have a drink with every now and then. I had 2 boys and was happy in living a peaceful life on my own after going through hell. So I meet this guy who was just a couple years older than me, and he had turned his life around completely. When he was younger, he used to be in gangs and would do drugs and that kind of thing. But now he was sober and into working out and staying really fit and doing family stuff, and he left the gang life behind. I guess you can say I felt protected by him. He was a hard worker, self-sufficient, had a son, and he loved going to the gym every day. I myself had kind of a crazy past, but I overcame it, so we seemed like a good fit for each other. We would go to dinner, the movies, or I would have him over at my place sometimes on the weekend. Normal dating stuff, but eventually he wanted to spend more and more time together, and I was having trouble giving up all my free time for him. And he would get really angry about this, like really angry. After being with a controlling, possessive man for so long, this was obviously a red flag, and after 3 months, I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. But then he said he needed to confess something to me. He admitted to me that he had been using steroids, and that was the reason for his mood swings. He cried, and he said he was sure that that was the reason, and that he was willing to stop it if it meant we could have another chance together. I unfortunately obliged, but only under the condition that we remained friends for now. Things were okay for a while. We saw each other maybe once every other week, and he started wanting to see me every week again, and eventually every day. To which I told him that I was not interested in being anything other than friends at the moment, since I was not ready for a relationship. He tried to talk me into giving him another chance, but I just didn't find myself interested in him in a romantic way, so I insisted that we just be friends. I stopped talking to him because I got kind of annoyed at his persistence. He would always ask me about my whereabouts and ask for pictures of who I was hanging out with, and I literally had to tell him that this is not what friends do. He just insisted that he was innocently trying to see what I was up to. Fast forward to 6 months later, and I hadn't spoken to him at all within that time. I was happy and living my life, and slowly things were starting to go back to normal. But one night, when my youngest son was at his dad's, I went out to a local bar with some friends. My oldest son, who was 13 at the time, was home alone, so I left the bar a little early. That way I would be home by 10 p.m. Shortly after I got home, I laid down and went to sleep. I was dead asleep when I suddenly feel someone slowly sit on my bed. I remember wondering why my son would come sit on my bed in the middle of the night. In my half-awakened like haze state, I realized he wouldn't. I turned around, and it's not him. It was Max, my ex. He was laying down in bed next to me. I sat up and asked him how he got in, but he wouldn't answer my question. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Okay, but when you need to talk to someone, you don't just sneak into someone's house and into their room in the middle of the night. You call them, or you leave a note for them. Literally anything but this," I said. "I don't have your number anymore. I needed to talk to you before it's too late," Max said. I didn't even entertain the part where he said before it's too late, because I was livid, but something told me to keep my cool. I sat up and I said, "Look, I really want to talk to you too, but not like this. Please just leave, and I promise we'll talk tomorrow. Just call me tomorrow." So that's when he gets up and walks over to my side of the bed and starts rubbing my shoulders and is slowly making his way to my neck. He said, "Do you really want to talk?" I looked him in the eyes and I said, "Yes. I've been wanting to talk to you, but not like this. Like I said, please just call me tomorrow." He stares at me while rubbing my neck and goes down to my shoulders, and then he lets go and says okay. Then he proceeds to exit through my patio door and jumps over the fence in my backyard, which told me that is exactly how he got in. So obviously, after he left, I freaked the hell out when I checked on my kid, but he had no idea what was going on. He was fast asleep. I made sure that all the doors and windows were locked in the house, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day I texted him, and I told him that if I ever see him near me or if he comes to my house ever again, especially unannounced, that I will call the police to make sure he gets arrested. If you're wondering why I didn't call the cops to begin with, I knew he had a gun, so A, I was scared of being retaliated against for being a snitch, and B, I figured if I called the cops, they would probably not do much, or that he would be bailed out of jail and they would just let him out. And I was afraid of what he would do after the fact. Either way, he left me alone and I didn't hear from him for years. 4 years later, I'm going through Facebook and I see his face in People You May Know. I clicked on the picture and I noticed that it looked like a jail picture. Like it looked like he was in jail. I scroll down through his page and his most recent post is him posting his address for his family members to write to. It was a prison address. So I googled his name and sure enough, articles after articles, all off the same headline. Man arrested on suspicion of killing girlfriend. About 2 years after him and I dated, he shot and killed the girl he was dating. That could have been me, and I feel like shit thinking if there was anything I could have done to stop him. And an even scarier thought is that he only got 12 years for her murder. So I've lived on my own for about 2 years now. I have a very small home that I'm able to pretty comfortably afford. I have an attic area, and at a guess I'd say it's about 5 by 5 meters in size. And you can really only stand in there in the very center. Anyway, I work the night shift at a factory. I usually get home around 8 a.m. I was coming home from work one morning during a heavy storm, and when I got home I went straight to sleep. When I woke up, I went on my phone and saw that I had a bunch of notifications from before I went to sleep. I have cameras set up inside and outside of my home. I saw that one of the cameras had been tripped at 7:42 a.m. I got home around 8:10 to 8:15 in the morning. I checked the video and I saw that it was a man. He was pressed tight up against my bedroom door and he was fumbling around with the handle. He did this for about 10 seconds until he spotted the camera. Once he did, he very quickly ran away. This unsettled me and disturbed me greatly, but I didn't make a huge scene. I looked all throughout my house and there wasn't a sign of anyone, so I chose to forget about it, and I figured he was spooked by the camera and just ran away for good. I honestly thought that was going to be the end of it. I got around to making myself some food and I discovered something in my kitchen. My back window was open, in the dining room. The rest of the day consisted of this, me noticing small things that didn't seem right and scaring myself. All up until I left for work at 10 p.m. I spotted something that made my heart leap into my throat. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see it. My attic entrance was slowly being slid open. I can so vividly remember questioning my sanity. Surely I was just hallucinating or something. I looked over at it, rubbed my eyes, and I absolutely saw something that stopped me in my tracks with fear. I saw fingers wrap around the hatch, and the door was moving more, and very slowly. I didn't know what to do. I could feel the panic beginning to really get to me, and I wasn't sure if I should leave the house and call the police, or if I should try to yell at whoever was up there. I chose a mixture of both. I began calling 911 and I ran to my bedroom where I could lock the door. As soon as I began running, I heard the hatch get almost ripped off with the speed they moved it, and I arrived at my bedroom door. I looked down the corridor and watched for a second, seeing only a little slice of the blackness up in my attic. I saw the human hand still holding onto the sides of my ceiling. I yelled, "Whoever is there, I am calling the police and I have a gun. If you take a single step out of there, I will shoot you." The adrenaline was really making my hands and voice shake, but I tried sounding as tough as I could. He obviously wasn't very scared of my threat because he dropped down right through the hole of the attic onto the main floor. I slammed my door shut and I locked it as quickly as I could. I put my phone up to my ear and realized the 911 dispatcher was waiting for my response. I was able to get the police to my house and they showed up relatively quickly, thank God. I told him I didn't know if the man was armed or not, and the dispatcher told me to stay in the line. I then heard the man walking up to my door, and he started rattling the door handle. He also seemingly went through my cupboards in my kitchen, as I heard a lot of commotion out there. Truth be told, I don't know why he stayed. I would have just left the house if I were him, but he stayed right up until the police came in and arrested him. Apparently he was a homeless man, and he was armed with a knife from my kitchen, and he had recently been seen in the area trying to get into other houses. This happened only 3 months ago, and I'm very frightened to sleep still. I now sleep with my bedroom door locked and all the windows closed. I also sleep with a knife under my pillow. I know that's kind of crazy and that this is very unlikely to ever happen again, but I just cannot forget about what happened. So that's the story of the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. It all started about a month ago when a man started banging on our door at 6 at night, yelling for someone named Mike to come out, and that he needs to speak with him and that he needed cigarettes. I told him he had the wrong house and that he needed to leave. There has never been a Mike in my house, but he became even more aggressive, calling me a liar and how he was going to, and I quote, "come in and beat that skinny tramp that you live with." My dad and I are the only ones who live in the home, so I had no idea what he was talking about. I tried to call the non-emergency police line because I have never called 911 before, but they didn't pick up. Looking back, it was pretty stupid, but it was my instinct. After some more yelling, he finally left, thankfully. I called my father, who was across town, and asked him to stop by, and I told him about what was going on, and he showed up. He also called 911, and he filed a report himself. The guy eventually came back, and my dad started screaming at him and threatening him. The cops were called again, and they showed up an hour after the call. And they couldn't find him, and they told us to defend ourselves if it came to it. I ended up staying with a friend for the night because I didn't feel safe at home. I can be a strong person, I guess, but I don't think I can do much against a drugged out crazy man that's much bigger than me, who probably also had a weapon. What made this situation even scarier to me is that as I was going through some footage captured by my outside security camera, it showed clear video evidence of the same guy walking up to my house hours before our first altercation, and I had no clue. I have really bad anxiety, so the next few days were filled with paranoia and stress, but I managed to finally calm down and convince myself that this was the end of it. Come that weekend, my father went on a trip with his girlfriend, so I was left alone for a couple of days, and I wouldn't be able to have his help. I just put on a scary movie when I heard screaming again and a loud bang on my front door. I pulled up my camera to see what was going on, and there was a man that was pacing back and forth on our sidewalk, and he had thrown over our trash can, again, screaming for Mike. I called 911 and they showed up within minutes this time, and they were able to find him down the street. They tell me that there was nothing that can be done since he hadn't committed a crime yet, but if he comes back to call again, and that they'll have more of a reason to arrest him. thought this was complete horse crap because he had been harassing us for days, but whatever. There was nothing I could do, so I tried to forget about it and I hoped for the best. Things were quiet for a few weeks. I again believed that this was going to be the end of it, until the next day, that is. It was the very next morning that my father and I got into an argument, so I wanted to take a walk to clear my mind. I went across the street to a park and I sat by a tree where I watched cars pass every now and then. Just beautiful morning weather. I noticed a truck drive down the left side of the park and turned to the street that my back was facing. He waved as he passed by, and so I did too, thinking it was just a man going to work or something. He then pulls off onto the right side of the park, stops, makes a U-turn, and came back. He was now heading in my direction again. Red flags instantly go off in my head, so I get up to start walking home. I look back and I saw that he had turned off his headlights and he was tailing me. I get to the front of my house and he slows down. I got a better look at his face this time, and he looked exactly like the man that had been harassing us. From the physical characteristics to his red baseball cap, he just glared at me like I took everything in his life away from him. I eventually made it to the front door of my dad's house and I tried to barge in, but my father locked the door out of anger of me walking out and our heated argument. So I had to yell to him that I was being followed and to open the door. He finally opened the door, and by then the truck was gone down the street. I'm terrified to leave my home. I don't have a car to get anywhere quickly, all I have is a bike, but even now I'm scared to ride that. I don't know who this man is or what his intentions are, but I live in paranoia, waiting.